I hear all the time, should I get out of what I'm doing and get into this business? What's the best business to get into? What's the best industry? Where can I make the most money? I hear it all the time, so let's talk about it. I'm going to give you my list of the 20 attributes of the ideal business. It's quite a bit of information. I'm posting in the comments the 20 attributes, but I'm going to discuss each. So if you want to add a service line, or if you want to start a new business, or you want to get into a new business, after doing this stuff for 20 years, after 5 startups, after building multiple companies to 8 figures in annual revenue, I have put great thought into what is the ideal business. What does it look like? So let's get started. In no specific order, we're going to start with TAM. You'll hear that term all the time if you're in the private equity world. Total addressable market. It's the opportunity. So if you live in a little bitty city in Arkansas versus living in Dallas-Fort Worth, where I live, your total addressable market, the number of clients that you could sell any given service to, is vastly smaller in your little city in Arkansas or wherever you happen to live. So that's one. How many people are there that I could even sell this thing to? Second, the service you're selling is only desirable to so many people. So if you picture a neighborhood, looking down on it in Google Maps, and you picture all the homes, the service you want to sell, is it something 10% of people in that neighborhood will buy? 50%? 70%? That's also the total addressable market. So how many people are there in the area that you'll serve, your market? And then of those people, how many will buy the thing that you have to sell? And how often will they buy it? Will they buy it every week? Will they buy it once a month, once a quarter, every 2 years? Those are the numbers that go into total addressable market, which go into how good is the opportunity. Number 2, does this business have a low cost of goods sold? COGS. If it has a low COGS, it has a high gross margin. We want an industry, a business with low COGS. You may not know what that means, so let me define it. Cost of goods sold means what does it cost me to produce the work I'm delivering to my client? So if I charge $100 and my cost of goods sold is $30, it means it costs me 30% of the revenue to produce the work. So if it's $100 billed to the client, my COGS are $30, it costs me $30 to deliver the work. That leaves me with $70. That $70 is my gross margin. That gross margin, the $70 in my example, is used to pay the expenses not related to producing the work, my overhead, and leave me with profit. The lower the COGS, the higher my potential to have a big profit margin. So if I'm looking at 2 industries, and one industry has a COGS of 30 on average, and another one has a COGS of 50 or 60, let's go with 50, immediately I like the one that is 30 better than 50. Now that doesn't mean the one that has a COGS of 50 is bad and you can't make profit. You absolutely can, but this is a big consideration. So if this is something that you're not familiar with in your business, cost of goods sold and gross margin, even if you never get into a different business, I strongly encourage you to learn this concept right here. It will change the business you currently own. So you're looking for a cost of goods sold that is low so that the business you're getting into has a high gross margin. A higher gross margin allows you to try things, test things, figure it out. If you have a low gross margin, there isn't room for mistakes. There isn't room for trying things and testing. It'll destroy the profitability of the business. A high gross margin gives you a lot of breathing room and ultimately gives you a lot of profitability. Number 3, I would prefer a business that's not emergency related. I don't want lots of after hours calls. I don't want lots of weekend calls. Now, that doesn't mean you shouldn't be in that business. I'm giving you a list of 20 ideal items. But it doesn't mean any one of these immediately nix the idea of being in that business. An emergency business, an after-hours business, a nighttime business, they can pay wonderfully. They can generate lots of profit. But in a perfect world, I'd prefer to deal with less emergencies. But it doesn't mean I wouldn't own that business. It doesn't mean I wouldn't invest in that business. We're just giving attributes that you have to decide, is this something I want in a business? Is this something I'm willing to put up with? I would call HVAC a bit of an emergency business, as an example. Plumbing is an emergency business because when somebody has a problem and their system is not working, they are adamant it gets fixed immediately, and that becomes your problem. Contrast that to killing bugs, way less emergency. And so just consider that one as what kind of business are we in? And if we're going to be in the emergency-based business, are we willing to accept that? Are we willing to staff for it? Are we willing to bill for it? You got to get paid for that. I would prefer, number 4, an industry with a low number of private equity companies in the industry. Now, the reason for this is as more private equity money comes into the industry and they're investing more, the client acquisition cost, called CAC, is going to go up. Private equity is intelligent. They buy a business. They want to grow that business fast. One of the ways they're going to do that is they're going to do a lot more marketing in the industry. You're now competing with private equity P-funded companies. And so that means it's going to cost you more money to acquire clients. They will come in and they'll push up the CAC. Now, a positive about private equity coming in is they're probably going to raise the prices in the market. And that's good for you. It makes it easier for you to raise your prices. Another great thing about private equity is they're going to come in and optimize to sell the business that they've bought. And in the early days, they might be a little more difficult to compete with because they're doing a great job recruiting, they're doing a great job marketing, so it's harder for you to find people, it's harder for you to find new clients. All that's going to cost you more. But on the back end, sometimes, not always, private equity will really start to clamp down on the expenses of the business, and the quality and the service level will come down in that business, which makes it a little bit easier for you to compete. There's pros and cons with private equity in a market. But one of the biggest cons goes back to they're going to be recruiting hard for employees and they're going to be recruiting hard for clients, and that will cost you more money. Number 5, does the business have a low Capex? Capex means capital expenditure. Do you have to invest a lot of money to build this business? Do you have to buy buildings? Do you have to buy tons of trucks? Do you have to buy very expensive tree trimming equipment, grinders? What do you have to buy? If it's a business with a massive CapEx, that is a much more difficult business for you to grow. It's going to be much more difficult to finance the money or finance the business. You're going to have to take out debt. It's going to slow down your ability to grow. The pro is that it also limits lots of competition. So it will reduce the number of people that can come in that business and compete. So heavy CapEx businesses naturally create a bit of a moat and keep out a lot of competition. That's really good. But for you, if you don't have a lot of money, those early days building that business can be very expensive and very painful. In the long term, it can be a real advantage for you. So low CapEx businesses oftentimes are very interesting. 6, I think I'm on 6. Licensing and permits. Licensing and permits create barriers of entry. Much like the CapEx, they keep a lot of people out of the market. If somebody has to go get a permit, if they have to do licensing, if they have to do apprenticeships to be able to get their licensing, whatever the scenario might be, that will keep out tons of competition, which means you'll be able to charge more. You probably have a lower COGS, higher gross margin. That's really good. So I like businesses that require licensing and permits. It's a pain in the butt to get all that stuff. It's harder for you, but that is exactly your advantage later because you'll have less competition. This is the next one. Is the client online searching for the thing you sell? Are they on Facebook looking for the thing you sell? Do they go to Google and type in and search for this thing? Can you find them? Can you get to them? Do you know how to market to them? Do you know their avatar, like what they look like and how they think and what their pain points are and what they want to buy and all that stuff? If you know that and you know where they live and how to get to them and how to market to them, and they're also searching and looking for you, then your cost of client acquisition will not be a disaster. If you have a great business idea, but you have no idea how to get to the client, it's going to be an incredibly expensive business to build. So there are lots and lots and lots of people searching for the thing you have to sell. And if that's true, there's probably lots of competition. But that doesn't bother me because lots of competition to me proves the viability of the business, and I will just outmaneuver, outserve the competition. Next, would the client feel a lot of pain if they were to delay buying the service? As an example, when the HVAC system breaks, or they have a plumbing issue, or a sprinkler head is broken, they need to take action. If a tree has fallen, they need to take action. Whereas if it's power washing, or cleaning the home, or cleaning the windows, They don't have to take action, they can delay. So there are services where the client is forced to take action, forced to spend the money, even in a down market, even in a recession. And then there are other services that could be considered luxury services, or they're just services where I could put it off 6 months, I could put it off a year, I could put it off 2 years. You know what? I'm going to wait another year to trim my trees. I'm going to wait 2 more years to trim the trees. Instead of cleaning our windows every 6 months, let's start cleaning them every year to 2 years. Or maybe we clean them ourselves, whereas an HVAC, I may not be doing that myself. So we're thinking about the clients that have, what are the services that need to be performed that generate a lot of pain, meaning the client's got to get this fixed, got to get it fixed now, and they can't delay making a buying decision. They can't delay doing the thing. Can you build a stable route? Can you build a route where you go to the same homes every single week? And that route is very tight, and you don't have, so this is one of the next items, you don't have a lot of billable, non-billable drive time in the route. So think about mowing lawns. Think about grooming dogs. In my neighborhood, there's a grooming truck that shows up, and it hits 5 or 6 homes, and they're at each of our homes for an hour and a half. And they're here every month. That's an interesting business. And what I know of the dog grooming business, it can be a really good business. They're incredibly stable routes where if you were to call and say, hey, in my example, we need to cancel, they may not be able to see you for another month. It's that stable. People stick with that service. So can I build a business that has recurring revenue, very stable routes, very tight density? Again, it drives out a lot of the wasted money, the expense out of that business, and it's a much more profitable service. Next, can we grow this business with marketing? I prefer to be able to grow a business with marketing than have to spin up a giant sales team. Now, some would disagree. They love building big sales teams. And you can build really amazing organizations with big sales teams. You can go way faster sometimes with the sales team than with a marketing-driven organization. But I like the idea of being able to grow a business with marketing. I think it's easier to scale the business in the longer term. I think I can better drive my reputation in the market. There's a lot I like about it. And some of that's just because I like marketing better than I like sales in terms of building organizations. It's not a negative on sales. But for me, one of the attributes is I want to be able to establish a brand, a reputation, and marketing. I want to be able to go out to my most ideal clients and get them through marketing versus having to send out someone to knock on doors. Again, I want to be clear. Nothing wrong with a sales-driven organization, but I think it's, in my opinion, easier to grow a marketing-driven organization. If I can build the marketing piece first and get really good at it, I can always add the sales piece later. Next, do you have the ability to actually make the client happy, to get good reviews and great referrals? For example, mowing lawns versus the thing that people are just like so thankful. So as an example, if you did a landscape installation, everything's changed. It looks phenomenal. They feel so great about the property. They're excited. Or if you fix their HVAC system, it's 102 outside, you've now fixed it. They're very thankful. They're very happy. Whereas some other businesses, like let's call it mowing lawns, is a little bit of a thankless job. Nobody's excited about that thing. That's the thing they have to pay for that they really don't want to pay for. Not that anybody wants to pay to have their HVAC system fixed, but it's just not one of those services that people feel really good about. There's like, great, mowed the lawn. Okay, we took care of the thing we had to take care of that we don't really want to pay for, versus getting an outcome that just solved a problem that was creating huge pain, or getting an outcome where somebody feels so good about what you've just done for them. And in the scenario where they feel really great about what you've just done, you're more likely to get reviews when you ask for them, and you're more likely to get great referrals. Another one, is it a recurring revenue business? Can we build long-term relationships? Can we sell a client today and serve them for 7 years? The longer I can serve that client, the better. I don't have to build a big sales team around it. I can spend more marketing money to acquire the client because they're going to stay with me longer and spend more money with me. There's so many advantages to a recurring revenue business. They'll sell for more money than a one-time business. A lot to like about recurring revenue. Is the business semi-recession-proof? HVAC, plumbing, mowing, I call all these semi-recession-proof. we'll go back to my tree business example. And I don't actually know how impacted trees are by a recession, but I'll use the example of I can delay a year trimming my trees. It's not the end of the world. Maybe I have to trim some branches off the street for the city, but outside of that, I can delay it. I could delay power washing. I can delay windows. Doesn't mean these businesses are bad, but I use that as an example to say which businesses are a little bit more recession proof. That's interesting. Can you gain a competitive advantage? This is another one. Can you implement technology in the business and outmaneuver, outperform your competition? If you were to learn the data of the business and understand what neighborhoods are the best to sell to, and when you sell to those neighborhoods, how long does the client stay with you? Which neighborhoods do more people terminate from? What are your COGS by division? Like all this data of the business. How long do people stay with you as a client? If you knew that data, and you're in an industry where most people don't know that data, you will dominate. You will win. So do you have a competitive advantage in technology? Do you have a competitive advantage in data? Do you have a competitive advantage in marketing? Are most of the individuals, companies serving this market fairly poor marketers? They don't really do much. Their websites aren't very good. Or is there, back to something I alluded to earlier, a competitive advantage around Capex? If you spend more money to buy better equipment or bigger equipment, you outperform, you outmaneuver, you gain some competitive advantage. So an industry that has more competitive advantages like I've just described that I can check off, the more I'm interested in that business. The next one, can I get a higher revenue per man hour than another business, another trade? So I can have fewer people producing more revenue. The higher the revenue per man hour, generally the better for a whole lot of reasons. They tend to be a little bit easier businesses. If they have higher revenue per man hour, it's easier to find people. So if I'm selling a service where the average person makes $30,000 a year versus the average person makes $70,000 a year, the one where they make $70,000 a year is easier for me to recruit. I like that business better. So I'm looking for a business that's higher revenue per man hour. So you could use mowing. Maybe the average revenue per man hour in mowing is $50 an hour, but in HVAC it's $120. It's that example. Now, granted, the labor costs more. The people performing the work cost more. But I like a higher revenue per man hour business better. The next one is very similar to what I just said. Higher employee salaries. Because if I am serving an industry where I can pay $70,000 a year to a team member, then there will be longevity in the labor pool. What I mean by that is if I'm in an industry where people make $30,000 a year and we can't really pay more or the client won't buy the service, nobody wants to be in that business long term. Nobody's parent is going to say, hey, go into this business. They're going to encourage them to go where they can make more money, where they can have a better life. If you're making $70,000 a year and you have two incomes, you can live a good life. And so what are the businesses where I can pay more, I can attract better people, more people, there will be more employees in the future coming into that industry versus an industry that doesn't pay much. It's going to be harder to find employees in that industry. So there's a lot of downward pressure on that business in the long term, meaning labor is only going to become more of a problem. So I like industries where I can pay more money. What is the government risk? Is it a business where you have to use contractors? And contractors come with their own set of risks. You could find yourself in trouble someday. You could find yourself in a situation where it's not really legal to be using contractors, or the government cracks down on that, or whatever the situation might be, and it messes up your entire business model. Or what might be the environmental risk? The government cracks down on something you're doing that's considered to be non-favorable to the environment. So think through what are the things that we're doing inside our business that could be at risk. And maybe it's not even a government risk. It's just some type of a risk that 5 years out into the future, after we've invested all this time and money into building a great business, it's detrimentally harmed because of some risk outside of our control. Can you scale the business? Can you take exactly what you're doing and take it to a different city, to take it to an entire region and grow the business? Could this business spread throughout in our case, United States, to all the different cities? Another item of scaling is, can you grow the business, the revenue of the business, and the the expenses do not grow in lockstep. So if I grow the rep business 100%, scaling to me also means my expenses don't grow 100%. Will we gain efficiencies as we scale up this business? Will the business over time, as it gets bigger, through efficiencies, become more profitable? Second to the last item, add-ons. And this is one of my favorites. Can I sell one or more services to a client base, build a very large client base, build a really good company, and later, when I want to add another service offering, I can spin that up and sell that into my client base? Will my client base support me adding additional lines of business to my business and then selling that back into the client base I've already got? That is incredibly valuable. Not all service lines support that. If I can do that, that is a top attribute that I want in whatever business I start. And finally, we'll call this the dream scenario. I'm looking for an underserved market. I'm looking for a market where and I've had a few of these, when I needed to I have a sprinkler system in my ceiling. When I needed to get that serviced and I called around, I was amazed at how poor everybody's websites were, how hard it was to get anybody to call me back. When I asked my neighbors who all have sprinkler systems in their ceilings, they gave me names. Nobody ever called back. The service level was not good. And when I did find somebody that came to my house, the billing rate was high. And I thought, what an opportunity. So what is the opportunity if you think about a market where the websites are poor, they don't call you back, the marketing is poor, it's very hard to find companies of this type? That's an underserved market with a lot of opportunity. What is a market where eventually private equity will come into my market? Because when private equity comes in, the valuations are going to go way up. And that's awesome, because if I want to sell in the future, I want to be in an industry that eventually private equity will come into it, or if they're already here, they'll come in a much more significant way. So to tack on to what I just said about underserved, I think about an invisible market. So what's a somewhat invisible market right now that's being underserved, that maybe private equity and a lot of competition's not paying attention to? A lot of the competition's become very comfortable, very complacent, that I can come into and I can do all the 19 things I just mentioned, or some number of them, build a really interesting business to really compete against the complacent competition. And eventually private equity is going to show up in this industry in a major way, massively increase the value so that I can sell my business. So these are my 20 attributes. I'm going to post this list in the comments. If you have other attributes, I'd love to hear them. I'd like to add them to this list. I'd like to know what it is you think forms the most ideal business.